This episode is in partnership with Authority Magazine. Authority Magazine, a Medium publication, is devoted to sharing in-depth and interesting interviews featuring people who are authorities in business, pop culture, wellness, social impact, and tech.
Ziggy Lorenc is getting a little older and, dare we say, wiser.
From her days as a VJ to an afternoon talk show host, she's now all grown up, like us.
But he still loves to swoon over advice, and today she's here to talk to Kevin and myself about her career, change, and aging. Ziggy, welcome to Believe in People.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be on a program that's called Believe in People. And I'll tell you why, because growing up with my parents who are kind of Edwardian people who, went through trauma through the war, you really couldn't be sad. And so if I ever was, though, my mother would say to me, don't be sad, go be with the people. Right? Because when you're with people, that's where you get your strength, actually. There's nothing else but people. And so that caught me, when you asked me to do the podcast. I thought, yeah, because that's all there is. I figure all that you really have in life, I've come to this conclusion, is your home, your family, your friends, and a garden, maybe. And those are the things that are important when push comes to shove. I think a purpose and a livelihood is very important. But I think at the end of the day, I think those are the things that are important. If you could rent a kid, if you don't have one, that's always nice too. It's fun to be around.
It's so true. And I love what you said about people, being around people. That's actually really profound.
Well, yeah, you know what? I felt coming from my mother who, when she was retired, she had no choice. They retired her at 65 years of age. And she turned to me one day and she said, "Oh, no. You mustn't retire. I am so sorry I retired. I miss all the people from work. I miss the camaraderie. Don't retire too soon. I'm stuck with your father." Right? And a few hours later, after that, my father came knocking at my door and he said, "Can I have a coffee? Your mother's driving me crazy." so, so I've kept that in mind. It's funny what you remember, right?
Well, as folks who've followed you, because you were a mainstay on television in the Toronto area for many years. As folks who follow, I mean, I'm now retired. I was in television for 43 years.
Right.
I had to teach myself that retiring wasn't the end. And I'm wondering what your advice is. I look at it now as like a new season has opened up in front of me that I never thought was there, even though we grow up with a tremendous sense of dread about it. Although I find a lot of people's attitude is, "Oh, finally I'm free, yay." Other people are like, "What the hell am I going to do with myself?" And like your dad said, your mother's driving me crazy. I mean, all these things happen. But what is the path that people should take?
Well, that's different for everyone. Let's look at you, Kevin. I mean, you're really still working. You're doing this podcast. So yes, but it's a lot of time to fill. If you are retired, there are a lot of hours to fill. And unless you're really engaged, like let's say that you have like a tremendous amount of hobbies, right? It's not going to be enough. Maybe it is for some people, I don't discount that. But there are people like us who need to do something substantial, have a purpose, in other words, because sometimes if you're retired, you lose your sense of purpose. My sister retired. That lasted all of about a week, and she said, "I'm going back to work. I need to work. I need purpose. I need a reason to get up in the morning. It's not enough for me." So everyone's different. But yes, you know what? I kind of got a bit of the feeling of retirement when I was given a golden handshake when I was 40. And I was sort of at the peak of my game. And I had to reestablish who I was because I completely forgot who I was. All my identity was pretty much wrapped up with what I was doing at City TV and Much Music and, all of that. And I had put too much importance in a way on my purpose. And so, you know what, I had to kind of branch out and find out exactly who I was. And I did because I finally had a chance to relax. I've been doing it for so long that there was nothing else in my life. I hadn't traveled, for instance. I hadn't taken a vacation at all. And so it was very good for me, actually. And then I was back in the fray. Moses Neimer decided to start a new company, so a few of us were brought back to launch him and Zoomer media. And so there I was again. But in that time, I did a lot of strange things. I took road trips. I thought I'd write a book, and I did, which was very flawed and put away. But you know what? It was good. It was really good.
And,
There,
and
So I had
there,
actually,
to get the hang of it.
And actually, for the listeners and viewers, so Ziggy, just for people that don't know, which I can't imagine they wouldn't. You dominated the airways first, as you mentioned, Much Music VJ, and then on shows like Life on Venus Avenue, The Ziggy Show, Sex TV. You were a pop culture diva. Your career spanned all genres, so TV, music, film, literature. So what attributed to that success? And then when you needed to shift, what did you shift to apart from, I mean, now jumping on with Moses?
Well, I was always shifting because I started out as a switchboard operator at nighttime in a very sketchy area of town where the first station was at 99 Queen Street East. And it was just supposed to be a temporary job. I can't say I was having much luck in the acting field because at that time there's a certain type, and the type was 6 foot tall, blonde human being, woman. And any agent I had could figure out what to do with me. And so I was young, I was 20. And I suppose when I started working nighttime on the switchboard, and then it was just sort of a stopgap, but they wanted me to work full time, which I did. And then I realized this is really interesting. I love that job. But you know what? All the buttons I had to press, it looked like NASA. And you could look really nice. You had your nails were good, but everybody congregated at switchboard. It's the best job I ever had. To this day, it was my favorite. And it was so interesting. So I suppose that I had met my peers, my people, because that's what you're trying to do when you're young. You're trying to be with your people, and I found them. And it was just by the grace of God that I kind of ended up there. And talk about believing in people. What would happen was that you'd be having like your break, having a sandwich at lunch, and someone would ask you, hey, Ziggy, do you want to be in a commercial this afternoon? I'd be like, okay. It was like that. It was very, very open. The people were open. So this is what I mean about being with your peers,
Yeah.
your people. They helped you rise. It's people that help you rise. It has nothing really to do with yourself or whatever talent you think you possess. It's not about you, it's about what people do to lift you up. And then, over time, I worked in PR. I didn't always work on air. I worked in the PR department. So, and then I was responsible for helping try to launch a pay TV channel. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that happened where I learned about television. I wasn't smooth. You know, I would get a memo, go to the newsroom and start doing community events. I'd be like, what? What do you mean? And so they'd assign a person, right, to help me along. So I had JD Roberts, who I think he's at Fox now, Brian Linehan, who helped me
Right.
out a lot. He was fantastic, got me drunk a whole bunch of times at the Imperial Room as his date. So I learned the ropes. But not smooth, not smooth. I don't think Moses and I are like smooth anyways.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it just sort of evolved over time, much to my surprise. So what I thought wasn't my lucky break turned out to be my lucky break.
Do you think, I mean, do you think in any way that this favorite job of yours, the golden job as the switchboard operator, where everyone congregated, is that because you? This is really corny. Is that because you learned how to listen to people? Do you think? Because
I
that
think
was
I
part of
was I think I
that's
always
part of your
listened to.
whole thing is you listen to other
Yeah.
people on
I
your
don't know.
shows.
I was a real chatty Cathy, but you know what? It was just so strange she would show up in the sketchy part of town because you'd buzz people through and like all of a sudden Farrah Fawcett would show up, Sally Field, Sophia Loren. One day, Gloria Swanson turned up, right, at this dump, right? You have to walk up this long ramp to get to switchboard. And she was like in her 80s and she had gloves on, carrying two red carnations. So I met the first great movie star of all time. It was just pure theater. And you know what? When the day was done, you didn't have to worry. And so that's what I liked about it so much. There was no worry factor to it. And I got to know everyone from shipping and receiving to God Almighty, like whoever happened to come in. So, yeah, it was just a great amount of fun. It was
And
tremendous fun.
And Ziggy, it doesn't seem to be, I mean, it was really Much Music City TV was a real anomaly. And I don't see any replication of that in other businesses. I really haven't. I've seen a lot. And so what do you think that is? And what would you hope would be added to that? How can we improve on what's going on now in life?
You're right about it being a special place in a special time with special people. Absolutely. And it was the pioneering of a lot of things. We're
Yeah.
also young. That's another thing. I don't know what it would entail to keep that kind of dynamic of when you're young and creative or, maybe a dreamy kind of person. In the 90s, a lot of tabloid stuff was used as filler in television. And that's when it got to be more about scrutinizing and, more of a
Good point.
negative aspect to it. So I think a lot of what we're listening to, hearing about is primarily negative. I hope that it's a cycle, and I think that it might be. And so it will turn around to be more hopeful. And your podcast is a sign of it. I mean, you got tired, didn't you, of the mess that's going on in the world and through COVID, and you decided to do it, which is brilliant. And I think that's the kind of thing that will change the whole dynamic.
Oh
But,
my
we
God,
mustn't.
we're groundbreakers.
Well, you are a groundbreaker. Actually, it is in the midst of all this circus activity and wars. Do young people really need to hear about any more hardships? I don't think so. Everybody came out of COVID awkward
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
without
yeah.
social skills, so they're trying now to adapt. So it's a bit of a mess that way too.
Well,
But
this is where it comes from, is all that. I mean, this comes from the debris of COVID,
big
effluent,
time.
the
Big
effluent of COVID.
It
And
was hard, I don't think it was, hard for some of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s because we were used to nothing happening, like, especially on a Sunday. Remember Sundays?
Yeah, nothing
There's
open.
absolutely nothing, and so you'd start reading the encyclopedia for something to do. It's just like So you'd have to make your own kind of fun. So I think that we had maybe an easier time of it than the young people. The young people seem to be what I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
And, people our age have, kind of been through, quite a bit, SARS, never mind COVID and, you know, other things.
It's so
But
true. Ziggy, what do you hope for the younger people?
I hope that they have a chance because, back when we were growing up, it was easier to, try to make it out on your own, to have a place to live and maybe congregate with people who are creative, to be in the center of things. And, everyone seems to be so disenfranchised. So that I hope that changes so that because like I said, you do need people to help you along. You can't do it on your own. Nobody can do it on their own. Just doesn't work that way. And so that's what I'm hoping for them. And this bad news. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got to be in an upcycle. That
How come older people are so crabby?
they can be. I don't want to be one of those. I've
Me
run
Sorry,
either.
into
I'm guilty.
He's speaking of himself.
you're not crabby. You don't come across as crabby. No, you don't.
Just
No,
watch
I
me
don't.
as pure
Ziggy,
tradition.
what are you working on now?
Oh, right now do you know what? Like what I'm doing now is just my radio, basically. Sometimes I work in TV production, but I have, quite a few radio shows to do. And so, I focus on that. And, it keeps me really occupied. I focus now too on, seeing my friends and my family. And I'm busy. I must say, I'm busy and quite content with my lot in life. Yeah.
You're talking
So,
about generational things. You did mention what it was like when you were growing up or whatever. There's a famous phrase that somebody's mother said once, which was, "You're not bored, you're boring. Find something to do." And that was kind of like, it's like, oh yeah, okay, let's go outside or something. But when you talked about the television, in the 80s, for example, those MTV in the States, much
mm,
in Canada, music produced in Quebec,
right,
um, young people would gravitate to that. It was kind of like a meeting place. You mentioned J.D. Roberts, John Roberts, who's now at Fox, Jeannie Becker, um,
right.
these sorts of things. But people would gravitate to that because it was kind of like a place to belong. Maybe like we used to watch, Mr. Dress Up and Mr. Rogers. It was kind of like a place to belong. Do kids
Well,
have a
here's the
place like
thing.
that anymore?
No, that's why it was one of a kind because in a lot of ways, Moses Neimer was, they always say he's a visionary, that comes up a lot, but it's more than that. What he is an impresario. He's kind of like Ed Mirvish. Ed Mirvish was an
Yeah.
impresario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he would open up the doors to people. Do you remember when Ed Mirvish would hand out turkeys,
Oh yeah,
Yes.
sure.
outside of Honest Dad's? Well, Moses opened up the doors to the station to allow young people to witness a concert within the building. I mean, if you're to do that now, look at Taylor Swift. Like, are you going to pay $2,500 for a ticket when everyone could just hang out outside the building and see a concert
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
sorts? I mean, of course, it wasn't 1 to 2 hours long, but there was always something going on.
No, I
And
mean, you even invented that box on the corner where you can go and sound
Oh,
off.
speakers corner.
Right.
you're right.
Yeah, that
Right.
was
We
a yeah.
we put it back up at Zoomer actually. So it's right in front of the building. So it's back. But some
It's there.
crazy
It's
things
there
going on in
again.
there, I can tell you.
Does Zoomer feel, Ziggy, does Zoomer feel, and if you could just explain what Zoomer is for those who don't know, to our listeners and viewers, is it similar to sort of a younger Much Music? Do you equate that, or am I completely wrong?
I do. I realized it was the same demographic and everyone's age. So it is, of course, it's not wild and crazy, but it well, we do have our moments, but it's for, people who are aging but have some zip. So, that's sort of the line, Zoomers with zip. And there's a lot of production that goes on that we do that's actually Canadian production, which is really nice because most stuff is bought.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of different facets to the company because there's the magazine, there's the radio, AM 740, Zoomer radio that I work on, longest reaching signal, World War II signal, 96.3 classical, Joy TV, One TV, Vision TV, and now we've got Blog TO, the Daily Hive, online properties, and
Wow.
Daily Hive. Yeah. So it's really grown from 2006 when just a few of us were called back to launch something new. So that my position then was more administrative. I wasn't doing radio then.
Huh.
So I've been like in and out like a fish through all these different incarnations. It's interesting. Never a dull moment. No.
So can I
Yeah, and
be
I still work with
can
the
I
same
be a
people. Some of the same
boomer
people.
with zip?
Pardon?
A
Am I a Zoomer with
Zoomer.
Zip?
Can I be a boomer with zip?
Yes, you are a Zoomer with Zip. Look at you go. Come on. You're amazing, right? You are. You are. Well,
Zoomer.
you have to be. What choice is there? I
Okay,
mean,
Zoomer.
yeah, what can you do except age?
That's
There's
it.
nothing.
Next time I get the okay boomer, I'm going to say, nope, I'm a Zoomer.
Thank you.
Exactly.
That's really
Exactly.
great. It sounds better, doesn't it?
It
I'm going to tell
certainly
them to fuck off.
does.
Yeah.
Ziggy, who inspired you throughout your career
Um,
the most?
I think mainly people that I read about, actually.
Ah,
From the time that I was a child, I read a lot. And so, and to this day, I prefer memoir. I like to see how people tick. So that's my genre.
Huh.
So, oh my God, many. I love MFK Fisher as a writer. I love a lot of writers, actually. My most favorite one just died this February. I was bereft. I was so sad. And that's Ellen Gilchrist. And
Oh,
she
yeah,
was a wonderful
yeah,
Southern writer that was very amusing with some really great quips. So, yeah, so I tend to not put people on pedestals, actually. That's something I don't do. Everyone's equal to me. But I do love certain people who write and have something to impart,
yeah,
if that makes any sense. So, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
is that a particular Canadian trait that you don't put people on pedestals? Do you think? Everything seems to be so
I
blah.
think it is.
I think it is too, actually.
I really do think it is. I mean, we're unable to do that. It's probably a good thing. Equality for everyone, which is the way it should be, really, right? People
Yeah,
are
no, I've
people.
often thought of that myself, and I just think it's a quality or a trait that it does have the other side of it where the Canadians are the first ones to put themselves down when they are successful, but at the same
That's
time
true.
they don't really falsely put people up either. So
No, we try to remain sane, I think is what we're trying to do, not let it get to our heads too much. We try to remain sane. I hope we are. Right?
it's
I like to
true.
think I am.
I hope we are too. And I wanted to ask you before we end our podcast. Wow, time has whipped by.
It
Ziggy,
has.
you were a big city girl. You lived in the city for a very long time and then moved to a smaller, quieter place. I don't know if that was during COVID or what inspired you to do that.
Well, again, I felt that in Toronto, there's a lot of blockbusting going on. There's a lot of change via construction with condominiums that were coming up and changing the whole landscape. And I found that through COVID, I found that you could not be at the front of your place, nor could you be at the back without the noise
Right.
and constant disruption. So feeling hemmed in. And now, when I decided to move here to Port Hope, the first thing that happened was my sister and everyone else said, "Why? You're a city girl. Why?" And I was like, well, it's town and country. It's not like I'm in the sticks. But here's the other thing that would happen. My sister said, "Where's the hospital?"
I
And,
know exactly.
and
That's
I was like, what? And as it turns out, if I was still in my hood in Toronto, it would take me an hour and a half to get to the hospital. But here it would take me approximately 10 minutes or so.
wow.
At the
That's
but it's
hilarious.
so funny, it's other people's reactions, but I love it because, you can you have nature, but there's still some stimulation if you want it in town. And I've got a big front porch. I call it the gallery. It's huge. It's like a bunker. And I just kind of sit out there in the coffee with my coffee, even in the winter, and wave to people.
That's
And that's what
nice.
you do. You wave and you can like kind of have a dialogue with yourself and you get nostalgic or whatever it is. It gives you a great deal of time to get to know how you're really feeling. It's nice expanse,
Yes.
it's a good expanse. So I don't regret this move at all. I thought I might. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but it turned out to be a really great move.
So
It's really
you've come full circle in that your front porch is still the switchboard. There you are waving at people.
yeah, right.
There you go.
Of course, they
There you go,
probably
Kev.
half of them probably think you're nuts, but what the heck?
No, you know what? At this point in time, I'm sure that you feel the same way. I don't really care if somebody thinks I'm nuts or not.
That was going
You
to be a close, Mike, because I get to ask the closing question, and we've already talked about how much you believe in people and how much people mean to all of us. But I want to ask you, I mean, people do react in various ways to whoever we are. And that's why I want to ask you, with all this believing in people that we're trying to do, how do we respond to how people turn to us?
Well, you know what? I think we've gotten used to the fact that, people have always reacted to us one way or another, even before social media. Social media, a lot of stuff creeps up where, it tends to be on the negative side. It's very difficult these days to state your opinion, for
Oh,
one. It's hard to be outright. Comedians must be having like just the best time of their lives. And what you can do is still be what you always have, and just try to be gracious. And if it's a naysayer, they're a naysayer. What are you going to do to switch them around? But you still, like, because you're doing your podcast and I'm doing my radio, I still want to like my listeners and be a companion. And I figure that's all you can really be.
hmm.
And so, take it or leave it. This is what I offer. I respect you and I hope that you respect me.
Well, we're so happy that you still have your radio shows, Ziggy,
Thank
because you are an
you.
institution and you really are. And we're so grateful for you being on this podcast today. Thank you so much.
Do you
There
know
you go.
what? The pleasures have been all mine. Thank you so much for having me. And of course, I'm wishing you well. All my
Thanks,
best well
Ziggy.
wishes. Good luck to both of you with a wonderful podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One thing that I found was interesting is that you find your people. That's it. When you're feeling down or you're feeling, that you're missing something, just as Ziggy's mom said, go find your people.
Well, and in order to do that, you got to like open up a little bit. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of us could still do that. Especially, we always harp on the fact that we've come out of COVID, but there's still a ways to go. So
Yeah.
open up a little bit and believe in people. And there you go. Join us again next week. Subscribe, for crying out loud. Do us a favor.
Thanks, Kev.
Goodbye.
Bye.